Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another very special episode of Ben Stan. Very excited for my guest today, Brendan Keeler, someone that I've admired a lot for the work and his thought leadership. Very popularly known as the health API guy, And Brendan, I'll let you introduce yourself, and very excited to get into this with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm Brendan Keeler. I'm the Interoperability Practice Lead at HD Health. I'm also the Health API guy. I write a newsletter and Substack periodically. I've worked at Epic, Redox, Zeus Health, and was head of product at FlexBud most recently before coming over to HCD 2 Junes ago. And so, yeah, I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Brendan. Um, Obviously, the things that we're going to discuss today is extremely important, and I think the timing is right. How do we make healthcare interoperable by default? This is something that you live by every single day. It's ingrained into the work that we do at the garage, in pretty much everything that we do, right? And how do we together envision that data first future, right? So that's basically how we're coming at this. But let's start with, you know, um, kind of reflecting on what's working as it relates to interoperability, at what cost, right? How do we build trust, which I think is a serious issue across the sector? And are we ready to expose the work that you're doing to AI agents? I think it's a very mixed state, is the way I'd see it. There are some use cases that are prime, some are not, right? So let's start with the state of interoperability. Obviously, we've moved from, pilot into mainstream adoption. TEFCA is a glaring example of where we are. I serve on the Participant Support Caucus Committee for TEFCA, and the numbers are real. We have more than 9,000 organizations, more than 45,000 queries, and 39 million clinical documents exchanged to date. There's almost, I read a stat that almost 70% of the hospitals in the country are engaged in some form of a treatment use case exchange, right? And more than 60% of the patients have access to their medical records, whether they're engaging with it, they're trusting it, that's secondary, but they do have access to their, normalized medical record, right? So given all of that, two thoughts, Brendan, I would like to pick your brain on a couple of things. One, what do you think is the most underrated shift that we've seen in the last couple of years that I think requires more, that evangelism, if you will, so we can drive more interoperability? And two, how do we go from a exchange that makes the data available into how do we make that exchange more actionable, right? How do we bring in standardization, contextualization, normalization, so the data can be enabled to be more actionable where it matters, right? So your thoughts on those two aspects?
Yeah, for sure. No, interoperability is a big, hairy, meaty subject, and so
Yeah.
breaking it down into its component parts is really important. Otherwise, you just get lost. I'm talking about connecting to an EHR. You're talking about health information exchange. TEFCA and the interoperability with a capital I is typically health information exchange, right? The exchange between different business entities,
Right.
and that is a very difficult, long road to do, right? Any sort of network-based product scaled to all of the United States takes decades usually. And so we've been
Right.
speed running it by any measure. That by at the start of the 2010s, we had very little
Yes.
exchange between health organizations, even for treatment purpose of use. By the end of the 2010s, we're up to 70% of providers. We Care,
Right.
Quality, Commonwealth, eHealth Exchange. And now TEFCA takes on that mantle to sort of push it forward because the battle of the last decade, treatment and providers, while not done, right, there's still this long tail of providers that don't participate in those any networks or health information exchange. The next battle is, wait, the entities that need a functioning very similar um, which is access to clinical data to do a job to be done, are not treatment. They are payers looking to do care management, to do quality measures, et
Right.
cetera. Claims, help with claims denials. They are life insurance looking to underwrite claims. They are lawyers looking for mass tort purposes. And so you have all these use cases that look at these networks that have been built, and so that's kind of close to what I want to do. How do I get in on that? And in many ways forcing their ways in, that are disruptive, causing disputes and lawsuits. But they deserve to be accommodated in a paved path way. And that is the challenge right now. How do we build paved paths, infrastructure that's scaled nationally to help with operations and payment use cases, to help with these individual access use cases for life insurance lawyers, research, et cetera. And so that's the great tension of the moment in time we're in today.
Right. And in a way that leads to kind of like something that we've been wrestling with as well, right? Like I think about it from a perspective of we think about the business case for interoperability, Brendan, right? And you're right. It's an umbrella term that covers a lot of moving parts. If I just look at our industry, right, and you said 2010 to now, right? And if I think about all the macro variables, right, cost, quality, access, affordability, whatever, right? We have not gotten better, right? If you think about it, if you think about our percentage as total GDP, if you think about if care quality index on a world map, or if you think about access to care, especially in rural areas, it's not trending in the right direction, right? So, are we funding more point to point? Are we just churning this interoperability from a point to point standpoint, or without any reusability to the stack? Where are we not getting it right from a just from a business case standpoint, or is it too small a component that there are other variables that are influencing basically the general structure of the ecosystem and things like that? What's your thoughts on that? Like, even with all the work that you've done the last 10 years, take the last 10 years, right? And the last 2 years especially, why are the macro variables in the industry not pointing in the right direction?
We tend to have too much hubris in the tech side of things. We are the last bit that influences a little bit this way or a little bit that way. But the actual reality is that the incentive structures that come from society and from policy, and then we trickle down. And we're not the arbiters of changing whether or not we can have seismic shifts on how society is structured. That's not how tech influences things. It actually makes it slightly better or slightly worse. But the reality is, if the incentive structures are so broken that it is this rat race between payers and providers with no cap on either side, then costs will go up. And so, I think I don't have that same hubris, and I imagine you don't either. It's about what can we do to make each customer, each organization we work with a little bit better using what's out there, and build better infrastructure to connect it all. At the end of the day, that may enable you build the roads, but if you build roads and you're still allowed to drive 150 miles an hour, there's going to be accidents. And so policy shapes the tools that we use, the tech that we use, in ways that we shouldn't imagine that we can rewrite all of society by virtue of the interoperability or any tech that we build. We have to start a layer up about how are those incentives generated, because that's where everything is derived from.
Right. So, do you feel that the incentives are misaligned or undefined? Or you
I think I think from a depends if you're just talking broadly about, like, healthcare in America. I think in healthcare in America, no one has if I'm a hospital, my incentive is growth and expansion, and if I'm a payer, my incentive is growth and expansion, and the appetite to pay for that is fundamentally uncapped. And so I look at that just at that level, and it's like, why would we ever see, um, bending the cost curve or anything like that, so long as policy allows for that? And that's a hard truth to internalize. From an interoperability standpoint, are the incentives built in the right way? Well, you look at this sort of infrastructure in any industry, and there's some where it's just so fundamentally obvious that you should pool data and share data that they've done it, right? Like credit bureaus. And um, we've gotten pretty far in comparison to other industries, right? Like infrastructure for commerce. If I'm placing orders as a supplier and dealing with Target or something, it's also EDI. It's also, this X12. That's like we used, but it's way backwards because, the incentive structures aren't there. Target just says, come do things my way. And so, like, we're kind of people say, oh, we're way behind. But that's not actually the the truth. When you do fair comparisons across industries, we're somewhere in the middle, and that's derivative of, are the incentive structures there to make it the default choice that you operate way more efficiently as an organization when you've opted in versus opted out. And certainly in a value-based care setting, the incentives are slightly more aligned. So it's the value-based care work say, I'm data hungry because I need to care for my population, and thus, of course, I'm going to participate. Whereas, fee for service, or certain specialties, you say, that might be better. Maybe I'd be better off seeing those patients records digitally, but I can kind of just do my thing as a behavioral, fee for
Right.
service type
Right.
of person.
Right. No, I think I completely agree with you. I think value-based care is probably uh, the most viable strategy you have to bank on to kind of drive that alignment of the incentives, if you will. Because if you think about ACOs, right, ACOs has been the most proven vehicle today for value-based care, right? And if I take the last 5 years and compare the total generated savings of the Medicaid Trust Fund and compare that to what you could potentially generate with the renegotiation of the top 10 Medicare Part D drugs, right? I mean, you kind of like see, are we putting too much work on something that's moving the needle, but not as well as another strategy that could move the needle in a big way, right? And both require interoperability, right? So that's kind of like how we are committed to that journey. For us, everything begins with that ability to normalize the data at scale for our customers. And because I fundamentally believe that you cannot achieve any form of equitable access to health if you don't have equitable access to data, right? I mean, that's simple, especially when you're talking about a value-based care initiative in the realm of that quintuple aim, that overall, kind of like the North Star for the industry, right? Um, let's talk about trust and compliance, right? Something that's very top of mind for everyone, that you, me, and everybody else. And in the last 3 years, we've probably seen more large scale breaches than we've ever seen in the past, right? So, why we are pushing for more data exchange at scale, access to data like we've never seen in the past, what should be that minimum viable trust stack, and where it matters, provisioning, identification, however you look at, right, building trust and compliance. What's your thoughts on that? Like, it's kind of like, how do we get the both to blend in?
Yeah, no, I mean, is not just our industry, and is the advancements from AI, all these other things mean that hacking in a large scale way is like Jaguar in
Yeah,
LA, like,
yeah,
has been shut down for 3 weeks, and
yeah,
they may go out of business. That's insane for a brand of their stature.
yeah,
And so, yeah, as it applies to interoperability, well, when you've connected everything together, it's suddenly the bounds of the enterprise are every enterprise that's on the network in some ways. And whoever is the weakest link, becomes the entry point to access all data in America. That's a really scary um, truth. That is a really scary truth. And so, I don't pretend to be anything that I'm not. And that means I'm not a security expert per se. But what I do know is that digital identity is a huge focus right now, because having your employees with digital identity and and having that be checked as a hospital as they log in is a great way to really solidify one vector of attack. Because that is a huge. You look at these breaches, tons of them. I
mhm,
don't know numbers, but tons of them are affected by an employee that is
yeah,
compromised
yeah,
in some way. And so
yeah,
we've at HD we've encountered this in our hiring processes where people are applying that are not real people
right,
like that. And so digital identities definitely feels like part of the solution, um, that we're going to have to see organizations incorporate. And you see healthcare organizations adopting ID.me and Clear and
yeah,
these other
yeah,
advanced identity solutions, to prevent that particular vector point, or at least mitigate it in some fashion. But there's no checkbox with this stuff. It's a continued cat and mouse game. As
yeah,
they level up their game, so too do we have to
right.
level up our game.
What do you think of this idea of maybe leveraging the work that is being done by the QHINs and TEFCA, Brendan, as a trust hook, right? For example, if every organization that is participating for data exchange requires a participation on QHN or TIFCA by default, right? And TIFCA, for all practical purposes, is on top of, the just at least from a provisioning and identification protocol standpoint. Um, we are state of the art. It says separate SOP on it and things like that, right? So there's focus on it. So do you think that will help the process a little bit by mandating that everyone that participates in interoperability at scale has a trust hook built into TEFCA or one of the participating QHINs? What do you think of that idea?
Um, it presumes that, I mean, I don't know that it solves it solves things. I think it's a nice thing to include and certainly valuable in some respects. I think in general, I believe that the trust abuses that have occurred in the past year and a half have been demand signals for use cases that are under addressed. Like that is very clear that payers and
Right.
lawyers and these other things. And so long as they are viewed as wrong and out of bounds and they are not, we do not give them a paved path, a legal, scaled way to do the jobs to be done, that the demand signal is only going to continue to be bottled up and grow and force its way in through paths that, the ways that are less savory or legal, but less savory and to some unacceptable. And so to me, the biggest step forward for the networks are addressing and scaling those use cases so that it it becomes like oh wait, there's a pay path here. Why I don't need to off road and destroy the grass over there. It is the way I think about it because if you don't address the demand signal, you just create higher walls. There's more incentive for people to find a way in. Um, from a security standpoint, I think like an actual security of like someone joining these networks and trying to pull, that's challenging. It's going to be it's challenging to think about if we are really all of that interconnected. It just takes one person accessing one system, pretending to be a doctor or something to pull data. But the reality is any scaled network, Visa and MasterCard, they don't not have fraud. They don't not have
Right.
abuse. They have
Right.
really strong systems for fraud and abuse detection and really strong systems for how they address it. How do they deal with those things that naturally occur? Because the only way to stop them from occurring is to do no exchange at all. That is the
Yeah.
only impregnable. But
Right.
the net result is like, okay, if we take that in the context of Visa or MasterCard, we wouldn't be doing payments. It would be
Right.
that would you can only cripple um, exchange and communication by virtue of that perspective, right? Like if we talk about telephones and other communications networks, that would be equivalent to saying, "Oh, we have some spammers. Let's turn off email."
Right. 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 Got it. Speaking of use cases, what have you seen that's exciting in the realm of interoperability? Obviously, your radar is a lot more extensive than we are. We are honed in on pop health. That's our thing, and we see post discharge planning, patient reminders, prior auth. These are some of the use cases that we kind of like focus on driving more interoperability. What else are you seeing out there? What's exciting for you?
I love individual access services that,
Mm.
like Epic and Athena now have some live support across their Tefca user base. We'll
Yeah.
see more, I think, this fall from, I believe, eClinical works in Meditech, or might be the next ones up, in terms of enabling it, and that's awesome. Again, for meeting a demand signal, the demand signal for patients to access their data to direct it, and once you have that, well, you hypothetically could have it for a number of non-HIPAA entities. So life insurance and lawyers and things like that could use individual access apps to facilitate some of those workflows. And then
Right.
it may still be more frictiony than the treatment workflow, but then you have a real way to say, hey, go do it this way because it's the
Mhm.
right way to do it versus today where you say, nope, you can't do it. You have to go use SIOX or, mainly met record retrieve. That's apples and oranges in a way that doesn't meet the demand. Um, so I think that to me is really exciting to actually see become real in the next generation type of way. The thing I'm not excited about that everyone is sort of excited about is electronic prior authorization because I think it's really awesome because prior auth is clearly a pain point, but I think we're stuck in a weird vicious cycle, especially for the payer side of we're saying, okay, you need to turn around prior authorizations in 7 days. Okay, let's hire more people.
Yeah.
Well, people aren't
Yeah. Yeah.
reliable. They go on vacation, and so you can't staff your way out of it. Okay, let's use AI. Well, you
Yeah.
can't use AI because if you, a payer, cannot use AI to that you've turned into this arbiter of like a black box decides whether people live or die, right? Like the optics around AI in this use case are really bad. Okay, shoot, we can't use AI. I guess we just have to do lower fewer prior auths in general becomes the next step, and then
Mhm.
costs go up, and then they're back to doing prior auths again. So they're payers are stuck in this cycle, and I think creating electronic prior authorization is only going to increase the volume of prior auth requests that are sent across. So we're going to see a volume skyrocket number, in terms of transactions that will skyrocket because the
Yeah.
friction of doing it
Yeah.
will go down. Jevons paradox, and so that to me, uh, while there's gonna be a lot of solutions to automate and make things better here, I do see because of some of our policy and social decisions around payers using AI, that there's like a really rock and a hard place that is going to be exacerbated by that higher volume.
I think it kind of seems to be a common sentiment to all the initial use cases around AI, right? Including ambient, AI. I think that just a sheer volume of work that is associated to that use case is making it difficult to realize that ROI that was anticipated. You know what I'm saying? So I think the work that's happening today for to me is kind of like a bedrock of what's to come, and I think that's where at least my excitement is to think about AI from the perspective of an extension of proven transactions, right? Proven workflows, and not look to like basically replace it from start to finish, right? So with that, and kind of like the background of, since we're talking about data first AI agents, um, what's on your mind from an AI agent perspective, right? And I think it's going to happen. We are on this path where the amount of API transactions that are happening, and I believe Epic reported about 55 billion API transactions last year. And then if you look at where we are going with Tefka and whatnot, I think it's a matter of time before these agents are deployed, hopefully with appropriate guardrails, right? And just because of the use cases that we're going to be tackling as an ecosystem, how do we ensure that these agents are low regret agents and not end up creating more harm for the patient? What's your thought process on where we're going with AI agents?
I'm a huge unrepentant AI bull. Like I think that all of the LLM, it's very very clear they've already improved our ability to
Yeah,
do work in many
yeah,
ways. That I don't have the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that many do. That's not to say I don't think we're in a bubble. I think we probably are in a bubble given some of the weird mechanics of how money's flowing with some of these AI companies. But I think the reality is, even if that bubble bursts, the foundation of what's been built is going to be a level up from what we've had before. For agents, and particularly in the context of interoperability, agents add flexibility, right? The flexibility to interpret that previously standards-based exchange was rigid,
right,
like contracts and
right,
API
right.
documentation, and that's rigidity meant that in where there are edge cases, things break, and we fall back to a flexible and equally ubiquitous pattern of fax or phone calls or whatever. That's flexibility by virtue of the person. And so if we can use AI as a flexible lubricant of sorts around the Fire APIs that are there already, or around the payloads that are sent over these networks,
Mhm.
you can suddenly see how these rigid networks we've been built, or these rigid APIs we've built, can be used in flexible ways that make those networks far more viable. So instead of a phone call, which is ubiquitous and has the flexible um, people on either side, direct trust, sending a CDA payload.
Yeah,
Well, that was only one use case, right? Very
right.
strongly and strictly tied to just sort of a pseudo referral. But you can imagine more broader sets of payloads, not just a CDA document being sent over. And you can imagine it being used for everything we use fax or phone calls today, which is a much broader um, set of workflows. And so it gives me optimism that our networks could be very dumb in some ways, and that the agents could fill in the handling using Fire APIs or other APIs necessary to do all the work, the jobs to be done. So I think decoupling the business logic from the networks and allowing more simple push and pull of a variety of payloads becomes what we see. And we actually saw at the Connectathon last weekend, there was this language first interoperability track, the first of its kind, that was really just around that concept of how are we using agent to agent and things like that to send flexible payloads and have LLMs on either side interpreting and pulling and going back and forth in rapid succession. That to me is the future, like hands very, very clearly. Maybe not those protocols, but the idea of dumber networks with LLMs on either side that can do all the things back and forth and then escalate when the check is needed, right? When permissions don't allow for exchange of certain data or doing certain functions.
And it kind of aligns with how we are coming at this too, Pranam. We are coming at agents more from a more at the workflow orchestration layer, the presentation layer, and kind of letting the plumbing of the data and the creation of the intelligence be decoupled from the agent for now. I think that's good for us as we take on a very cautious approach to this agentic experience, if you will, until we have more maturity in the LLMs and things like that, right? So kind of that's our approach from an architecture standpoint. Great. I think we packed a lot in a 20-minute discussion, Brendan. I didn't even realize we are at time. But let me ask you a fun question. This is going to be the most difficult question more than anything else that I've asked. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm going to be a genie, and I'm going to give you one wish to eliminate one thing in interoperability. What would you eliminate?
Oh man, I would say closed documentation. And so I think there are a number of standards out there that still close documentation.
Yeah.
I think even just that would selfishly they should want to eliminate their closed documentation to encourage wider adoption. So that's an easy fairway one. I would say those standards, let's get rid of them. But like I'm not a standards purist. I think X12 versus HL7 versus NCP versus Fire. It's all just different ways of encoding data and a learning curve. So, but I do think closed documentation is dumb. It's actively dumb.
100%. Perfect. Brendan, thank you so much. It's really fun talking to you, and it definitely was a learning experience for me too. But thank you so much for taking the time to be on Ben's 10, and good luck with everything that you're doing. I'm going to be championing you on LinkedIn.
Hey, great to have. Thank you for having me on, and hope I see you around at one of the conferences this fall.
No, 100%. I'm sure we'll run into each other.
All right.
Take it. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to our channels. Episodes will be posted once a month with a variety of industry leaders, and you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook as a Garajan. Have a good one.